Stalin, section. From Socialist Democracy to the Great Terror. Having survived the St. Bartholomew's Night, that was the forced collectivization of agriculture, with the terrible social and human costs that come with it, the political relaxation that we previously encountered appears to re-emerge. After the victory over the kulaks, Kaganovich observes in September of 1934, it's necessary to, quote, move completely towards legality and educate our people with socialist legal consciousness. Yes, without the massive education of 160 million people with the spirit and consciousness of the law, it won't be possible to achieve the consolidation of our legal system. End quote. All of this is even more necessary because, as Stalin emphasizes, in the USSR, quote, there are no longer antagonistic classes. End quote. Therefore, there's no reason to delay the introduction of, quote, universal suffrage, direct and equal by secret ballot, and unrestricted universal suffrage. End quote. Therefore, the constitutional amendments which purpose, quote, taking away electoral rights from the clergy, ex-white guards, all the X's, as well as individuals who don't carry out publicly useful work, end quote, are rejected. Nor does it make sense wanting to give these groups, quote, only the right to vote, but not the right to be elected. And it also makes sense to reject the proposal, quote, prohibiting the holding of religious ceremonies. Now, it's possible to advance toward, quote, socialist democracy. It's not just a matter of propaganda, which certainly plays an important role. Before us is a political vision that provokes a fierce polemic by Trotsky, who identifies in it, quote, Stalin's liberalism, the abandonment of the, quote, council system, and the return of, quote, bourgeois democracy, in which class differences are eliminated and the subject is the citizen in the abstract. This policy turn is easily understood. Quote, the primary concern of the Soviet aristocracy is ridding itself of the Soviets of workers and soldiers of the Red Army. End quote. The antithesis between the two perspectives is clear. Having avoided the danger posed to the country's independence by a backwards countryside, dominated by kulaks capable of blocking the flow of supplies to the city and the army, and with the dictatorship of the Communist Party secured, Stalin has no interest in further exacerbating the political and social conflict. It's the drive to rapidly industrialize which compels him to seek the promotion of, quote, non-party elements to management posts in the factory and within society. It's unacceptable to take a closed attitude towards them. Quote, there's nothing more stupid or reactionary. Our policy doesn't consist in any way of transforming our party into a closed caste. What's needed is to make every effort to win over specialists, engineers, and technicians from the old school to the cause of the country's industrial and technological development. End quote. On the other hand, it's not possible to promote industrial and technological development without also providing material incentives for the training of workers and specialized technicians. And here arises the polemic against, quote, leftist leveling of salaries. Only by moving away from a crude, retributive leveling is it possible to introduce a more efficient organization of work and put an end to fluctuations in the workforce, especially among the most qualified who move from factory to factory in search of a comparatively better salary. Aside from egalitarianism and the low morale amongst the most qualified and productive workers, the policy of incentives should also put an end to the lack of collective responsibility and put in its place the principle of personal responsibility. It's precisely at this moment when conditions mature for the outbreak of the Third Civil War, the one that will decimate the very ranks of the Bolsheviks. Trotsky's position is very tough on what he defines as, quote, neo-NEP. Yes, in the CPSU a, quote, deviation to the right is happening, increasingly apparent, with the favoring of the, quote, higher strata of the people, end quote, and the counterattack by kulaks. The bureaucracy, quote, is ready to make economic concessions to the peasantry, to their interests and their petty bourgeois tendencies, end quote. More generally, also as a consequence of the turn towards the market, monetary calculus, and the resulting increased cost of living, far from advancing towards socialism and the overcoming of inequality and class divisions, Soviet society is increasingly characterized by, quote, new processes of class stratification, end quote. This internal retreat would be met, with respect to international politics, by the renouncing of all revolutionary and internationalist ambitions by the, quote, conservative and petty nationalist bureaucracy of the Soviet Union. Now, the only guiding principle is the status quo, as confirmed by, quote, the entry of the Soviet Union into the League of Nations, end quote. Obviously, neither Stalin or Trotsky are oblivious to the deteriorating international situation, but their response to this problem is different and opposing. For Stalin, it's a matter of concentrating on the industrial and technological development of Russia, mending as much as possible the divisions caused by the October Revolution and by collectivization in the countryside, and presenting the party as the guiding force for the nation as a whole. The stability that has been achieved internally could allow for, at the same time, the promotion of a policy of international alliances capable of guaranteeing the USSR's security. In Trotsky's opinion, however, as momentous as Soviet Russia's industrialization may be, it can only defeat an assault by the more advanced imperialist countries if it has the support of the proletariat within the aggressor nations. Therefore, the accommodation with the bourgeoisie, both internally and internationally, not only constitutes a betrayal, but it prevents the homeland of the October Revolution from winning over the revolutionary international proletariat, the only force that can save it. The clash between these two perspectives is inevitable. Kirov is assassinated on December 1st, 1934. The French-Soviet Pact is signed on May 2nd, 1935. Between these two dates, the above-mentioned intervention by Trotsky takes place, quote, Where is the Stalinist bureaucracy taking the USSR?, which is published on January 30th, 1935, and it's a heavy indictment against the internal and international, quote, neo-NEP. End of section.